Hello and welcome to the Children's and Teen Health Summit. I'm your host, Carla Atherton, founder and director of the Lotus Health Project, lotushealthproject.com, where we empower people to get healthy and stay healthy in mind, body, and spirit, and on the social, global, and environmental levels. For this session of the summit, I am excited to be speaking with Maureen Towns about parenting teens with addictions. Parent advocacy and support is what Maureen of Maureen Towns and Associates is all about. As a registered nurse with a graduate degree in leadership, Maureen helps parents who are uncertain, fearful, and walking on eggshells with their kids to find peace, certainty, choice, and direction. Maureen has 4 children aged 17 to 23 years. Raising them has been an adventure in self-discovery. Maureen offers others the perspective on parenting that she craved during the tough, confusing, and sometimes turbulent years, finding support for mental health and addictions with her own kids. Having worked in both the public and private healthcare systems across Canada, and having been a client of both systems, Maureen is perfectly positioned to help other parents find solutions. Welcome to the summit, Maureen.
Thanks very much, Carla. I'm really excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. And today we're really dealing with an issue that is quite serious, actually. You know, it's something that people don't really talk about a whole lot. It's sort of really hits close to home. It's exhausting. It's like, you know, it can really pull apart a family. It can just put you through the ringer. It's a hard thing to talk about this. So I really appreciate you being here, Maureen, and sharing your story and your insights and maybe some help for parents who are listening that are going through the same thing.
Perfect. Me too.
All right. So, you know, I'm going to ask you this first and foremost, because I do want, as we go, to kind of, you know, get a little bit more information about, you know, what you folks did and what happened, you know, in your life and your family to lead you to doing more work in this regard. But the first thing I really want to ask you is, what is addiction?
There's lots of theories on what addiction is. The theory that I've landed on and the definition that I use is that it's a chronic brain disease. And the disease aspect is really important, and one that I think is, coming to the forefront of people's consciousness and awareness, and an important part of understanding addiction. It is a disease, and it drives compulsive and impulsive behaviors that want for the user, because they want to feel good or lessen feelings of stress and sadness. So that's the slant that I take on addiction.
Okay. So, like, you know, in your experience, do you think our youth are at greater risk than adults?
Yes, for sure they are, because they have an underdeveloped brain. The brain, you know, there's lots of theories on when the brain develops. It was 25. We're now bumping that up to 30. And because of that, I mean, alcohol and drugs damage the brain.
Yeah.
When you've got an underdeveloped brain, it's so susceptible and at risk to that kind of damage that drugs and alcohol can do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then again, what do you think, that there's more addiction now than other points in history? Like, are you finding that it just seems like there's more and more and more these days?
It's hard to say. I mean, I can't give you stats, and I would even question whether or not they would be accurate stats on what addiction has looked like over the years. I think it was a sort of under-recognized problem in a lot of communities and for a lot of years. I would suspect that it is more prevalent now. And I say that because I think that the availability of drugs, and as well as other numbing behaviors and substances, has increased over the years. Okay. I know that, you know, for example, my kids have access to drugs that I didn't even know about or couldn't get my hands on when I was in high school. There's a lot more synthetic drugs out there, as well as there's other things out there that people can become addicted to, like, you know, the internet and things like that. I think that the availability of numbing things is really, really high and very prevalent in our teens' lives.
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's such a good point, because there's so many other things to choose from. So addictions aren't new. It's just that there's much more, like the candy store has become quite big.
It's become quite big, and it's almost hard to get away from. I mean, my kids would describe, you know, they went to a Catholic high school here in Calgary, and they would describe being presented with, drugs on the way into school. And, at any given time, even in junior high, would describe 5 drugs that they could get their hands on at any given time. And that blew my mind. And so, yeah, it's everywhere. And then there's the whole cell phone piece. I mean, kids can't tune out anymore, or it's very, very difficult for them to tune out. And there's no rest, there's no downtime. And so I'll speak to that a little bit further on when we get talking about some of the things that parents can do. But yeah, I think it's really tough for kids.
Yeah. I completely agree. So like on your website, you ask parents a list of really tough questions. Like when I was exploring there and getting ready for the interview and just really getting to know a bit more about what you do, Maureen, I was like, wow, these questions that you ask are extremely direct, but things that people don't really want to mention to, let's say, their friends or family or somebody they might, because they're just like, is this normal or is this weird? Or even something that's really maybe like, they're ashamed about. Like, so, like for instance, you ask, if you've ever lowered your expectations of your teen to lows that you could not have imagined when they were younger. Or scrolled through your teen's cell phone to look for evidence of support, to support your worries that something is wrong, followed them to see who they spend time with and what they're doing, locked up your personal possessions for fear that your teen might take them. Like, these aren't things that, we're talking about on a regular basis with people, because it's like, quite frankly, nobody wants to admit that they're thinking or doing those things.
No, and it's really stark when you sit back and look at, okay, what's actually happening in my house? Because these things that happen with our kids, it doesn't, sometimes, for some parents, this stuff seems to happen overnight, but for others, it's insidious and a slow build. And until that you suddenly sit back and you say, what's going on here? I've just put a lock on my bedroom door. I've started to take my purse to my room at night. And we do these things and we kid ourselves. I think that's why these questions are important, is because you sort of kid yourselves into believing that this is temporary. This is just something that I need to do. It's not a big deal. It's maybe a phase, or you get into these behaviors and you don't ever step back and look at, is this normal or is this kind of crazy? Because it gets really crazy. And so when you read this, and if it appears like crazy behavior to you, that's awesome. If you read this list and you read this and you go, yep, wait a second, hold on a minute, then you might be in some trouble.
Yeah. And so some of these questions that you ask or people to consider, have you done these things? They a lot of them have to do with trust, and some also have to do with noticing changes in behavior. Like, where was this one that I was just looking at? Okay, notice uncharacteristic behaviors, right? So angry outbursts from a teen who used to be calm. Notice that your teen seems suddenly withdrawn, depressed, or has difficulty sleeping. So, what I want to do is give you a little bit of space and time to kind of give parents and caregivers a little bit of information about what the warning signs might be that indicate maybe your child is using drugs or alcohol or addicted to something else like that.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, there are sort of 2 categories of questions here. One talks about the parents' behavior and one talks about the teens.
Right.
And, both are signs that something's probably going on in your home that you need help with.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that we see in addiction is an awful lot of lying. And I know that kids lie anyway. And so that's why this gets really difficult. But what got really strange for me was that my kids would lie about things that, I couldn't possibly understand why they would lie about these things. They seemed really benign issues. And yet they would tell a lie about it. And I would really scratch my head about that kind of thing. And I'd talk to them about it and say, why? Because we had always set it up that, if you tell the truth, the consequences aren't as bad, because we wanted honest, open dialogue. And here we had these kids who were lying to us about the oddest things. And so that kind of chronic, senseless lying is one of the things that I would say you kind of got to sit back and look at and say, what's happening here? And I'm not necessarily saying that means that your child is an addict. It means something strange is going on for sure. Notice that your teen seems suddenly withdrawn, depressed, difficulty sleeping, and getting out of bed in the morning. This is huge, and again, could be related to mental health and or addiction issues. We have a teen out there right now who's tends to lay in bed all day, isolates himself, and when the parents question him about what's happening for you, the only symptom that this kid can come up with, and I fully believe this is all he understands, is I have a bit of acne that I don't like. And I mean, when you look at that, you say, well, this child doesn't understand why he's lying in bed all the time. People don't lay in bed all day because of acne. Mm-hmm. So those kind of behaviors, because it's not normal. I mean, kids sleep in, they stay up late, that's normal. But needing, withdrawing from social activities, even when they're an introvert, has difficulty sleeping at night, maybe up during the night, and then really difficulty getting up in the morning, like almost unable to, is a problem for sure.
Okay. One thing that you mentioned is, I'm going to kind of go off the rails here a little bit, was you said that sometimes they don't know, like why, like this child doesn't know, or teen doesn't know why, really what's happening. Like they say, I have a bit of acne, but really, there's more to it. But that person themselves, that teen themselves, doesn't know why they can't get up. So that's really tricky, I think. And so do you have any suggestions on how to kind of, without saying there's something wrong with you and like, oh, what's the matter with you? How do you kind of get kids on board with, kind of understanding what's going on with themselves, and then that there's a need to do something about it?
Well, in the course of some of the conversations, I would talk about, here's the way you used to be. Here are my observations. Here's what used to be happening, and here's what's happening now. Do you see those things?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you recognize those things?
You still care about those things?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not necessarily demanding an answer or rationale as to why, but do you see these things, and do you understand that I have some fear and some concern here?
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what are the 4 reasons teens use drugs then? You have identified 4 reasons. What are they?
And I mean, they really all come down to the same thing, but I mean, essentially feeling good.
Okay.
I feel good. Or I want to feel better. Or I want to do better. I want to enhance my performance.
Yeah.
Either exams are coming up, or sports, or social situations, and going to a party. And the other is curiosity. I mean, teens are pretty natural experimenters, which is one of their strengths. Mm-hmm. However, it can lead them to drugs as well.
Yeah. Okay. So like the first 3 almost seem like they have a root behind them too. Like, so if they want to feel good or feel better or do better, there's something that's kind of telling them that they're not doing enough.
That's right. So they're looking for something. Mm-hmm. They're either looking for relief, or they're bored and they're looking for pleasure. They're looking for relief from boredom, right? I mean, they're usually looking for some relief.
Okay. And then that's where you can look, right, to find what that hole is, where that hole is that needs to kind of be filled,
Yeah, that's sort of something we're going to get into. Yeah. But it's sometimes, we'll talk more about it, because I mean, we could go right down that road right now. But yeah, essentially, and when I put this together, the 4 reasons that teens use, one of my sons, had a look at it, and he read it, and he smiled at me and said, "Yep, I've used for all 4 of those reasons." Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, so for someone like my oldest son, all of these were part of the package for him.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be uncommon, I would think.
No, I don't think it's uncommon either.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into that, like your own children. So Maureen, would you share a bit about your story and struggles with your own kids, and how you came to focus on helping teens and their families overcome addictions?
Sure. So with my own kids, I have 4 kids, and my 2 oldest boys, when they were in junior high, they began to experiment with drugs and alcohol, and we were only aware of some of it. I'd come across a little baggie in my son's dresser and question him about it. So and our attitude at the time was, wow, this is scary.
Yeah.
it's happening really early. We expected some experimentation, but we sure didn't expect it in junior high. And we took the approach that we better put some consequences in place for this, sort of in proportion, do a bit of a discussion to find out what's happening for them and put the consequences in place and then really keep an eye on them. What we found was that our kids didn't respond to the boundaries, meaning that, we put consequences in place, but they did not act in any way as a deterrent for them, which confounded us a little bit. I mean, we'd ground them, we'd take away their electronics, we would, I don't know, I can't even remember all the things we did. We seemingly tried everything, and the behaviors continued to escalate. I mean, to the point where we found out they were sneaking out at night, and we would get up in the night and they wouldn't be here. We'd start setting our alarm to get up in the night to check on them. And, this is the kind of crazy behavior that sort of sneaks up on you. You suddenly find yourself doing things and you're scratching your head saying, is this normal? Is this normal? And terrified. And, we'd had a great relationship with our kids. How could this be happening? And our boys are only 13 months apart. So they were, wonderful little co-conspirators and spent a lot of time together, even in their destructive behaviors. And so we started to consult some people. I mean, we looked into, employee assistance programs, and we went to some counselors to ask those questions. Is this normal? What else should we be doing? What else can we be doing? And I remember the response of one of the counselors that we went to. She sort of chuckled and said, "You're doing everything right. This is all very normal. There's nothing going on here." And we had a feeling in the pit of our stomach that this was grim news. A relief on one hand that this is normal, but on the other hand, we're doing everything we can do, and it seems ineffective. And is this just the way it's going to be for the next 7 years? Is this it? At one point, as the behavior started to escalate, and I came home one evening to find both boys completely passed out.
Oh boy.
Drunk. They'd taken a bottle of vodka and sat in the hot tub and drank it. And that is dangerous behaviors. And I found them passed out. And I, being a nurse, I sort of managed them physically until they were okay, and then took them again off to what's called ADAC in Alberta. And I took them in for an assessment and had some feelings that, a couple of things. One, I thought my kids were going to understand how serious I was, that this was not okay. They were going to see how serious we were about getting the right kind of help for them. We were going to get the right kind of help for them. We were going to get an assessment done. We were going to get some information and some tools. And what happened there was, again, we were told that the kids were fine. And that, and they may have been at the time. I mean, I'm not slamming ADAC at all, but we were told that the kids were okay, and that if we wanted to, we could come to some parenting information nights about drugs and alcohol, which was not what I wanted. I didn't want more information about drugs and alcohol. I wanted more information about what I should be doing with my kids.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, things continued to escalate. And by the end of, one son graduated high school with honors. He was always very academic, got a scholarship off to university. He went for engineering and, seemingly, traveling down the right path. And we breathed a sigh of relief saying, okay, he's going to go off to university. He's going to continue to use drugs and alcohol, but he's going to eventually get interested enough in his future to quit.
Yeah.
He's doing well academically. We don't need to worry too much about him. My second son, however, barely finished high school and, sort of scraped through his last year. And it became clear the fall after his high school year that he had a problem. He ended up living in his van. He was homeless. He did that for a period of about 2 weeks, in which my husband and I tore our hair out. Really scared to death. Really, 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 really worried. And really unable to ignore the issue at that point. And what we ended up doing was hiring an interventionist from the States to come and help us do an intervention with him. And we sent him to a treatment center in Quebec for drug and alcohol treatment. He was there for about 4 or 5 months. And the treatment center ended up closing down. The province shut the treatment center down. So there was various reasons for that. And he came home very, not hugely sooner than we were expecting, but in an emergency situation. We had to fly out there, get him quickly, and get him home. Mm-hmm. And we did. And what we did then was hire a company to come and help us with counseling. So this company was going to help us with reintegrating him into his normal life. So here we have this 18-year-old who is excited to be out of drug treatment, wants to, quote unquote, live like a normal 18-year-old now, mm-hmm. sees that he shouldn't use drugs anymore, but can't wait to go to the bar with his friends. We've hired this company to help us, establish boundaries, do some monitoring with him, do some drug testing with him, etc. All of which turned out to be, I would say 70% of that was a complete waste of time.
Wow. Oh.
And he relapsed within about 6 weeks, and then went on a series of, living with us, not living with us, living with us, not living with us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. During this time, my first son, who was away at university, was, part of a fraternity, and, we thought doing really, really well. He came home for a summer and was working here at his summer job when he had a psychotic break. And a psychotic break is a really acute brain injury. And that was as a result of drug use. So that was marijuana. So all those out there who think marijuana is a benign drug, I would have a conversation with. But so he had a psychotic break, ended up hospitalized, and, was at serious risk of permanent brain injury.
Oh boy.
If he did not cease using drugs and alcohol. And despite that, he couldn't seem to quit. That was our heads up with him. Wait a second, something is really, really wrong. And we ended up putting both boys into a treatment program here in Calgary, long-term drug and alcohol treatment. It was voluntary for them because they were both over 18, and it was a family program. And that was the program that I would say really turned our lives around, and really helped me to understand that parenting kids with mental health and addictions is different than parenting quote unquote normal kids or kids without addiction and mental health issues. And, looking back over those 7 years that we worked with our own kids, really looked at where were the gaps? What could we have done differently? What do I wish we had at our fingertips? And deciding to fill that gap for other people. Fairly passionate about it. It was really, really, really tough. And if I can help people not go through what we went through, then I need to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that so what was the difference between everything else you'd done in the past and with this program? Like, what were you doing? What were the strategies that you used to actually help your boys to turn that corner?
To get them into treatment, do you mean?
Well, okay, maybe, yeah, to get them into treatment first, I guess would be the first step, right? And then what happened with that treatment that actually worked? What were the strategies you used?
Okay, well, the biggest thing about the treatment was that it wasn't us doing it. So the biggest strategy we had was to step out of their program and work on ourselves. And that was, that's the whole piece, really, is that at that point when my kids are so sick, I am not in a position to help them. I am not a drug and alcohol counselor. I can't help them anymore. And that's part of the loss. Mm-hmm. What I could do was position myself and, my family, help my family position, all of us, so that drug and alcohol treatment was their best option. Because no addict they want to quit, but they don't want to do the work. Mm-hmm. It's really, really difficult. And so setting things up so that a person who's in the throes of addiction wants to get treatment is a bit of something that you need support for. Mm-hmm. And we had lots of support for that. So setting it up so that was their best option was critical to getting them into treatment. And then letting the people who knew what they were doing do their work with us as a family, because there was lots of family treatment going on. And we'll get into that as well, that it is really a family disease. And then, doing our own work and letting the experts do the work with our kids.
Mm-hmm. And so what were the experts doing? Were they addressing, what, like emotional stuff? They were addressing, maybe nutrition, or like what stuff, were the experts doing?
It was a blended therapy. So there was, healthy meals. Could they have been healthier? Probably.
Okay.
There was, but I mean, these are kids who are malnourished.
Yeah.
By the time they get into treatment, they're malnourished. There was also a really, really great complementary health program called Pure North, and a naturopath that went along with that. Really doing blood work and some diagnostic work with all the kids that were in treatment, as well as the families, to look at, where are you deficient, and what kind of supplements can we give you to help you be as healthy as you can be, so that you have the energy and the focus for your own recovery. Mm-hmm. There was also some concurrent treatment. They have a psychiatrist and psychologist that consult with them. And that was critical for us as well, because our oldest son was diagnosed with borderline personality just before he went into treatment. And that was, that's something that needs to be treated as well as the drug and alcohol addiction. And so working in a program, or having a program that's willing to work with other healthcare professionals to blend the treatments was really, really important. There was lots of family therapy, which I think was critical as well, and lots of talk therapy. The program that we went through was a 12-step program. Okay. And essentially, the 12-step program, it digs down into the emptiness. So, we'll talk a little bit about that. The reasons kids use feel good, feel better, do better are all symptoms of, like I said, looking for relief. So what is it that you're looking for relief for? What's happening with you? Mm-hmm. And learning how to find it in healthier ways.
Okay. So, just listening to you talk, Maureen, I can just feel how huge this would be for you as a mom. And so from your perspective, can you tell us what the impact a teen's addiction might have on a family?
Oh, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. The family aspect is huge. We have 4 kids, like I said. So our other 2 kids, so while all this crazy chaos is going on with our 2 oldest boys, our girls are just sort of sitting back and watching. Mm-hmm. They're bearing witness to us becoming somewhat obsessive about helping the sick kids. They're becoming resentful and distrustful of their siblings. There's lots of highs and lows with this. You have a conversation with your team. Things seem to be going well. Everybody gets their hopes up. It's going to be great. It's family dinner time, and they don't show up. And here we go again.
Yeah.
And as a parent, it's very difficult to provide centered, connected parenting with any of your kids when you're obsessed with the sick kids.
Yeah.
So there's a real effect on the relationship with the other kids and between the other kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So, when you look at the whole family system, it affects every system in the family circle. In terms of my relationship with my husband, my goodness, it didn't seem like, it would seem like we were both on the same page one day and then on completely opposite pages the next, trying to be on the same page about what's happening, what should we be doing?
Yeah.
Do you have the energy? One day I'm angry and resentful. The next day I'm feeling like a victim. The next day I'm feeling strong and really like I need to quote unquote do something, and I'm slipping into action, and I'm, wondering why my husband isn't on the same page that I'm on. The sense of grief and loss is huge. And the temptation to take that out on the person sitting beside you is big. Yeah. And so it's very, very hard on a marriage.
Yeah.
It becomes really isolating as well. You stop having people over. You stop going out. You don't have the energy for it. And you also, you just don't want to expose yourself to the potential embarrassment and shame that comes with some of the behaviors that your teen's exhibiting. you also get, for us, really tired of answering the questions about how are the kids doing. Like, oh my gosh, it's so awful. I don't even want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, as you can imagine, affects your health, your wellness, and all the relationships in the house are suffering at that point.
Yeah. So do you think, Maureen, that there's a time when you say, that this is all you can do when you have to make some space between you and your child for the sake of everybody else in the family? Is there that point?
You do say that. I wouldn't say that I would never abandon my kids.
Yeah.
And especially before your kids have the tools that they need to deal with whatever they're dealing with. I think that as parents, you have a responsibility to sort of step into that. Like I said, this is a brain disease, and I don't think you can expect people to, a brain to heal itself. You need help, and you need to be able to direct or set yourselves or position yourselves so that, someone who's resistant to getting help will do it or wants to do it. So, at this point now, my kids have got the treatment that they need. Would I ever step back and say, you're on your own? Let's see.
Well, how about for other parents, like saying, okay, well, this kid's violent, are there instances where you can think that would be, one of those decisions that people might have to face?
Yes. I mean, there's decisions that you have to face where your child can no longer live in your home.
Okay.
That's a decision that parents do have to make when their safety of themselves and their other family members is at risk. But there is usually another option besides just get out.
Yes.
And so that's where someone like myself comes in to help you to navigate and figure out what is the next best thing. But there are times yes, you do need to look after your family, and if the behaviors of one person in the family is putting everyone at risk, then yes, you need to make some really, really tough decisions.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then maybe this kind of leads to another question I had for you was, how can parents hang on to their kids well enough to help them?
I think it starts really early on. I mean, I've been giving this question a lot of thought. So hanging on to your kids, it's an interesting wording. I think it's about positioning yourself to help your kids, and it might mean letting go. If hanging on is your motive for what you're doing, you may end up making the problem worse. You might end up losing your kid. You have to run the risk, I think, of being unpopular or having them storm out. And that is, I wouldn't do that alone. But when you're being your most loving and caring self and willing to support your child, and when that is, one option is getting treatment. I'll use my kids as an example just to explain this a little bit easier. So when I talked about positioning myself so that, and my family positioning themselves so that my son wanted to get treatment, that was about being willing to have him not get treatment if he chose.
Okay.
So that was about saying, I love you and I support you and I believe that you have what it takes to get well. And this is the option that I'm giving you to get well. This is the treatment program that we've looked into, and this is the one that we think is the best, and this is the one that we're willing to pay for and show up for you for.
Okay.
And it's up to you whether you take that or not. But if you don't, then you do need to go.
Okay.
So that's the kind of positioning yourself that I'm talking about. And so hanging on, if hanging on is your option, if that's your motive, if I was of the mind that I can't let him go, he might die, and that is true. And so therefore I have to keep him here in my home. That is a fear-based decision and probably not a good one, and probably not what's best for you and your child. And it probably won't position them to get the treatment that they need.
Okay. I suppose when I used that wording, Maureen, I'm thinking like, Gordon Neufeld, his whole idea of hold on to your kids. And I think what he means by holding on to them is staying connected, right?
Yes.
So enough for them to be still hearing you and for them to feel heard at the same time.
Yes.
So, right. So that's kind of what I think, you're talking about, is being able to draw boundaries, but still keep that connection, keep that support of your children. Like I'm here, but we have boundaries.
Yes. And I'm glad you used the word connection, because connection is really the key.
Yeah.
When I talk about for me it is anyway, when I hear about, or when I talk about, the emptiness or the reasons that kids use, and it's to feel good, to feel better, to do better, etc. It's usually because of a lack of connection. An inability to connect with yourself, I think, is critical, and how you feel and be okay with that, as well as an inability to connect with other people. And so when those things are happening for teens, then they are more likely to use. And so there's a great book out actually right now called The Conscious Parent. Shefali Zavary is her name.
Can you spell it?
Yeah, her last name is Tsabary.
Okay.
The Conscious Parent. Really, really good book about, parenting from a young age, and staying very aware and very conscious and very centered in your parenting style, and helping your kids to be the same way, I think is one of the keys to building some resiliency. Every kid is different, and I think addiction is really, really complex. And so I know of parents, for example, that, really worked hard at building connection with their kids. But there was something going on with their kids, an anxiety disorder or what have you, that prevented that kid from being very comfortable in their own skin. I know of parents who did homeschooling, and again, something's happening for the child that they're not connecting with themselves or other people. So despite all of and then there's parents, both parents worked. There's parents from high socioeconomic, low socioeconomic, parents who were very faith-based, parents who were atheist, parents who never drank, parents who partied all the time. Addicted kids come from every type of family. And so that's why I say it's very, very complex. But there are things that I think that as parents you can do to set yourself up to be as resilient, or set the kids up to be as resilient and resistant to needing drugs and alcohol as you can. So, and I think this book is a good one.
Okay. So Maureen, would you let's do that. Let's do that right now. Let's talk about the how-tos. Like, what do we do? And so let's go into that. How do parents set up that resiliency? Like, what advice would you give parents that are kind of suspecting that there's something going on with their kids, or facing these issues for sure, with their kids being addicted to drugs or alcohol?
I would start sooner than that. In building the resilience, I think it's about helping the kids get really comfortable and connecting to their own feelings. And whether that's through meditation or some sort of downtime, stillness, allowing stillness for your kids. And role modeling, that's important, because as parents, we don't do that very often either, especially, families with young kids. It's busy. You are go, go, go. You're heading here, you're heading there. There's sports. You're trying to do all the right things, and there's not a lot of downtime. There's not a lot of stillness in that life.
Yeah.
And then you throw in the internet and the cell phones and Facebook and all of the other social media things out there, and it becomes like there's no stillness.
Yeah.
And I think any strategies that you can employ towards stillness and helping kids to get comfortable and feel safe in that process, and staying connected to your kids. Like you said, that book, Hang On to Your Kids, is about being connected to them, about being more connected to them even than their peers is important as well. There's also a whole component of, letting your kids fail, letting them fail and letting them overcome that failure or learn from it. We're so tempted to save our kids.
Yeah. Aren't we?
Right? Or nag them so that they don't fail.
Right.
How about letting them figure some of that out in a safe environment? These are all very calculated risks. And also the other thing that happens is, we hear from experts that our kids are, sometimes our teachers will see signs of an issue, or other parents or family members. And we're very, very defensive sometimes in the face of those cues. A teacher will say that, Johnny's misbehaving. And I know there's a whole culture out there that, we're overdiagnosing ADD and ADHD and medication's not the answer. And all of that might be true, but pay attention. Just pay attention to it and notice it and, do the research. And I think the parents that are probably attending this summit are the kind of parents who are doing that. So keep doing all of that, and I think a multifaceted approach for your kids. There's no one best way to stay connected to them, but just take as much opportunity as you can.
Yeah. And so, Maureen, what you're talking about, it's like, I had two questions about that. So my first one was, what advice do you give parents, who are currently facing these issues? And then I was going to ask you about prevention, like in retrospect, are there strategies you would like to share or advice to help parents prevent or see warning signs? But it almost seems like what you're talking about is both. It's both prevention and, what to do about it once it's sort of started.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got parents out there who are thinking that their kids are already using or know that their kids are already using and suspecting that maybe something could be going on, I would suggest an Al-Anon meeting and try and find one specifically for parents, because you're going to find people there who know exactly what you're talking about and can give you some perspective maybe on what's happening. Al-Anon isn't about advice giving, though. And so if it's advice or really, holding up the mirror for you and what's happening in your home, I would seek out some resources like we did. And I would put myself on that list. I'm not here, I'm not hoping to find a problem, but I'll tell you if I see something or if I'm hearing something. And I guess, the biggest thing that I can do is, like I say, help people like me 5-7 years ago who are wondering what to do next. Where should I be going? What should I be doing? How should I be building my team of support? I can help you do that because it's tough.
Yeah, it is. And, that kind of support is key too. I would so wholeheartedly agree and especially from someone who's been there. Because they've done all that work, they've done all the exploring, and they know exactly what it is. I mean, not exactly, right? We're all different in some way, but they've been there. They've been in the trenches is what I call it. So I find that those are the people like you that are really the ones that are able to support and help you.
I hope so. And really it's about fast tracking you to the right people at the right time. And because we floundered, like I say, we would call the AAP, we would, be on the Alberta Health Services website, looking around, we'd be Googling things and really, really couldn't decipher what was really needed. Just couldn't figure it out. It all kind of looked the same. We knew nothing about drugs and addiction, nothing. It was all new. And boy, we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot, so.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So through that, I know it's exhausting, like for parents, and we can't even stress that enough. It's actually, there are no words even for it. So how do parents stay sane and care for themselves through all this, through such a struggle?
I would talk to people who understand and who get it.
Yeah.
So somebody who can normalize it. And this is, I mentioned earlier, finding your team, your support network. And Al-Anon's a great place to do that. You need to find people who've been there and done that and who can talk about, give you perspective on what's happening and offer you solutions. So that's how they stay sane. I mean, we talk about the insanity of addiction and, some of the questions that I have on my website allude to that. The behaviors of following your teen around and scrolling through their phone and checking your odometer and locking things up, those are not sane behaviors. And so if those things are happening for you, you do need help for sure. And I say that with no judgment because I've done all of them. I have done it all. And I would say talk to people who understand and hold your head up. Hold your head up in the process. Because of this, because I do describe addiction as a disease, and yet we really, really, as a society, we see it as a moral failing, and there's a whole movement out there with some accuracy that it's a combination of genetics as well as early childhood experiences And what we tend to latch onto is that the early childhood experiences, and that there must have been something happening in that home over there where those kids are misbehaving to lead to that behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's where all the shame for parents comes in, and the isolation and the reluctance to talk to people about what's going on is the fear of judgment.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I say hold your head up, because you're a good parent, or you wouldn't be looking for help.
Maybe this is the answer to my question, my last question for you, which was, what is the most important point that you think you could make to parents about this issue?
Yeah, the most important point is that you didn't cause it, and you can't control it, and you can't cure it. I mean, these are the 3 C's that we talk about in addiction, and that's important. Parents need to know that. You can't make someone an addict, and you can't not make them an addict. It's a little bit like if you look at the disease process, you can't cause cancer, control cancer, or cure cancer either. But you certainly can set yourself up to be as healthy as you can be and hopefully avoid it. So that's what parents can do. You can set yourself up so that your kids and your family can be as healthy as they can be and hopefully avoid it. But at the end of the day, you can't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. Mm-hmm. And if you need help, ask for it. Reach out.
Okay. All right, Maureen. Okay. Wow. That was quite the interview. And I really appreciate you sharing such intimate stuff with us. And I think parents listening will get a great deal of support and hope and connection from you and what you're saying and what you're telling them. So, Maureen, I know you've got a website, you have stuff that you do, this is what you do now. Like, this is kind of like a calling for you. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our summit participants about your current projects and your website, how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my phone number is on my website, and there's an easy way to email me. A consult with me is free. It takes about an hour. I do have an assessment tool that I use, and I do a bit of a family history. And if you're, like I say, it's free. You've got nothing to lose. So if you're worried, you're concerned, please don't hesitate. I also help people not just with addictions, but mental health, because navigating the mental health system is sometimes very difficult and very tricky. And it seems like an awful lot of trial and error. And oftentimes it is. And so, I have 2 kids with borderline personality, and I have great relationships with both of them, and they're both functioning very, very well. And that's not always the case. It can be really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. So I'm not unfamiliar with mental health and the system there either. So, like I say, I'm quite passionate about helping people with those things. Like, I'm glad you used the word of calling, because that's the way it feels. Yeah. There is a free document on my website right now about the four reasons that teens use drugs. Yeah. Keep your eyes open for another one that's coming, a little bit about advocacy and how to navigate the system. So I'm going to put some tips up there for parents to download as free as well.
Okay, so perhaps that'll be ready when this airs.
It will be ready when this airs. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll make sure that people have a link and ability to get to your website and find that information. So your website again?
www.MaureenTowns.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen, for being part of the 2nd Biannual Children's and Teen Health Summit. And you have yourself a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks so much, Carla. Have a great day.